Hey viewers, and welcome back to another episode of Carl's Reviews. Well, in today's topic, we have another double review, and to start things off, we have Orion and the Dark. I would like to call this the start of the DreamWorks empire, since because of technically they have 4 films that are coming out in 2024, with 3 of them being released, where one's good, one's bad, and the other being okay, and an upcoming one that's quite interesting. But before we get into those projects, we'll start off here with Ori in the Dark, and kind of quite curious. It gives me a lot of quite of a. At first, I thought it would be like a Rise of the Guardians a bit, where it doesn't have more action and more focus on the emotions and storytelling. While also at the same time, it could give me more of a different perspective on these types of elements, a bit similar to the other DreamWorks films. And I will say, just like I said with describing the DreamWorks films, it did live up to my pretty decent anticipation. The plot of the film is centered around Orion, who is the kid that's basically afraid of almost everything. But then one night when he stumbles upon the personification of Dark, he then shows him around, how to face his own fears while learning about the ups and downs that Dark has, and also learn about the night elements along with it. And I will say the story in here is quite of an emotional ride, where it shows on how Dark can have its setbacks, while also having a nice message to show that not everything about Dark can be seen as terrifying. And I do enjoy the humor being quite dark, and to be fair, for a film that's called Orion in the Dark, it does make sense to have that type of tone. And this is one of the funnier DreamWorks films I've seen in a while. Well, at least for like a year or even like a few months for me. And even for like there's a twist that even showed that it's a story being told by the adult version of Orion telling that to his own daughter. And at first I was a bit conflicted as to how it would go, but the more scenes they add up to it, the more it gets better to show off how the emotional tone could work for this type of story. But after like the last 10 and 20 minutes of the film, it gets really confusing, like almost down. It gives me a lot of like questionable logic to how the ending would show up for the film. A bit like Freebirds, for an example. But if there's one thing I will find that's a bit weak with the story, is that the plot doesn't really feel like it exists, since it feels like it goes to show off more of its message rather than telling the plot itself. But doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It still works for the film's context as well, and does help the emotion and the comedy and characters all the worthwhile. And now, in terms of the characters, yeah, you can tell when you look at them first, you might find them to be a bit simplistic, but I think the acting is what actually suits them very well, and actually turns out to be very interesting and likable characters. Like, I wasn't even expecting Orion to be that passable. Well, I mean, I just expect him to be like some type of Linguini clone. But Jacob Tremblay surprisingly suits the role well, as he makes her to show off his own moments of Orion whenever he's afraid of something, and whenever he overcomes that fear himself. But to be fair, as much as I'm quite surprised by Orion's likeliness, I actually kind of find Doc to be more tolerable in this film. Seeing now just that he has some good jokes, but he also has his own depth of how he has a meaning to life, but most people don't really see that since they're mostly afraid of the dark. And I really do feel like it does hit deep into the dark side, no pun intended. And also, I'm actually quite surprised that the night entities are actually pretty decently comical. Like, even with they have their own share of mixed humors, there are a few of those that do have their own spotlighting to progress the plot. But to be fair with you, there was also Light, and to be fair with you, he's probably the only under the feather character in this film. They only say that he's rival of Dark, and that's it. Even if he goes around just being cool and all that, isn't that great? No, I don't think so. But then we get to the actual present day, where even like Orion in the adult version, along with his daughter Hypatia, and even if I was a bit confused at first, it generally did make the plot work. Look, as it is told through like a nice storytelling, and it actually does work well for like the emotional tone, and even to like how that the mix well in with the present day and to the past, and how they all sell in one big picture. And I like that. Also, before I get into the animation, I just want to note that this is not animated by DreamWorks, and it actually looks gorgeous compared to a DreamWorks film that isn't animated by DreamWorks. What a coincidence. But after the part, I want to say and how surprisingly gorgeous the animation looks, even if I didn't check out the trailer or not. I want to start with the character designs, and when I first look at them in some type of image, especially with the kids and some of the humans, I thought they were going to look off, but when I started watching the film, I actually genuinely got used to them, and does work out the tone quite well. Especially when it gave me nice Muppet vibes, especially one of the night entities that literally looks like a Muppet. And but the shocking thing I was quite defined in this film is that this has generally so many 2D bits in it. Like, not just in the backgrounds that give off a nice Puss in Boots: The Last Wish vibe, with its painterly filtered into the backgrounds, but there are also some scenes that actually have the use of the shadows and even like the illusions to like the use of like lighting and coloring, and that adds on to the extra detail. And before you ask, no, this isn't really me and my shadow, but I think Orion in the Dark is probably the closest we'll ever get to me and my shadow. So, good for you, DreamWorks. But the other, back onto the track, I will say that there was also like the use of colors that, even if the film is mostly just dark and black and stuff, it has so many vibrant colors through like the use of purple, yellow, blue, green, mostly through like the night entities, that at least makes it more vibrant. And the action is absolutely wild. I think the most benevolent of this is when we go into like some like the dreams, of course, that actually kind of lives into the intensity and even gets more action filled, and I was not expecting as to how deep they would go by. And even like through the use of transitions, and I know this, you may think that this would be like one of those films that have those weirdly used transitions that would be used on CapCut, but it's more to like the times when dark and light just shapeshift one after another, and does make the visuals look stunning. So, in conclusion, I actually was quite shocked to find that Orion in the Dark is suddenly the best DreamWorks film of 2024 so far. Now, I will say that there are some few things that makes it not too great, or even say like to be like a masterpiece, like how the story is a bit too confusing at some moments, and even like Light himself isn't really a great character. But there are some things I was actually quite shocked to see this to actually be as good as I wasn't really expecting from it. Like through like the use of fluid animation that has some surprising use of 2D moments, and even through like the characters being somewhat charming and use their own abilities and character traits that actually makes them stand out, and pretty underrated in my opinion. Now, I wouldn't say that this would be like the DreamWorks masterpiece we'd be open for, but if you want like a DreamWorks film that's decent, that isn't like mid or even terrible, then Orion in the Dark would definitely be your damn option. And let's hope that the Wild Robot will live up to those standards, whether it be high or even around those standards. But for now, I think it would be the best if I would give this film's credit by giving it an 8 out of 10. Moving on from Orion in the Dark, we have The Tiger's Apprentice. Oh, Paramount. Why do you always have to do this? You always have to put one of the more recognizable icons such as Turtles and Paw Patrol into theaters, but you never let your original IPs do the job themselves to be in theaters and not on streaming. Like, you already dump Under the Boardwalk. Why are you doing this the same thing with The Tiger's Apprentice? And this is even like a Chinese film, and we even got other films like then, like with Over the Moon and even The Monkey King, despite getting some streaming treatment. But as a Chinese film itself, it got a bit of my interest first, despite not a single advertisement being played in with the film. But the question remains is, how did I view it? The plot of the film is centered around Tom, where one day where he gets to learn that the grandma's story about the Zodiacs were actually true, he sets off to train off with some of the Zodiacs, with 3 of the Zodiacs remaining, and so that he becomes the Tiger Apprentice everyone's been anticipating, to stop the loot from taking over the world perhaps. And despite the plot not being well executed or how it's being explained, it at least does have an interesting concept, where it has all like this whole Chinese mythology bits and can fit well for like an action film like this. Heck, it could even do better than the Monkey King, perhaps. But sadly, this is not actually what we get in terms of the execution, because it feels like throughout the entire film, each scene feels rushed, and even when it tries to make us feel like emotional towards the characters, they only lasted for about like a minute or two, and they don't give out much focus to them in those 80 minutes of the runtime. Even like through like the montages, whenever Tom is training, it just basically just used like old pop songs like it was made in the 2010s decades. And the worst part about it is that the humor is atrocious. And it definitely comes with the dialogue that feels like it was written by an amateur, and not really of a good one either. But to be fair, I guess the one thing I do give the story credit is that it does feel more anticipated with the action. That at least can make things more intense as the film progresses. The same thing I said about the story is also applies about the characters here. It's just that they just don't get much of a chance for the characters to show off their true emotional side and even like their true traits. It's to make them stand out for one another. Like even like Tom is just your usual chosen one hero who's supposed to save the day, like he's your Miles Morales of the film. And who's just basically just like the strict teacher. I mean, I guess this actor at least gives him more of emotion and even more character traits to him, which I'll give that at least it makes a lot more tolerable compared to the others. The Zodiacs are just your usual type of psychic characters. There's only like 3 of them who only get like a chance, but most of them just don't really stand out much and can get most annoying moments, especially Sydney. My god, would I want to put him in a rat trap so badly. And there's even like Rav, who's basically like the friend of Tom, and who's also supposed to be the love interest, and her role is very confusing, where she only appears at, well, her true like role is basically around like the middle where she just appears. That'll make you think like she like that, and that only happens for like the half of the film, and nothing else. It's a very off move to pull off, I must say. And then there's Lou, who's basically just your typically main villain who just want to conquer the world, yada yada yada, stereotypical as usual. But the one thing that I found strange about Lou is that, am I the only one that feel like she looks too similar to Lilith Clawform? And but besides that, I would also like to mention that the one thing I'll give the characters credit is that at least I can hear the actors giving out in their roles. I mean, like, I can see them giving out more, like, at least giving them their all, and at least making it sound like they're not too bored and just want to feel like they're doing a job just for a money paycheck, so good for them. But besides the story and the characters become a bland, I'll give the film credit that it does have some solid animation. But that doesn't mean it's perfect, because there's one criticism I want to get off the way, and that has to do with the characters. I mean, to me, they feel like they're trying to do like a mixture of the stylized designs of Spider-Verse and Arcane. But the mixture just feels off, and whenever the characters react with their faces, giving off any signs of emotions, they give off more of an off vibe. Like, they even look a bit too similar to the characters in The Magician's Elephant. And even like at times when it tries to feel stylized, it only happens for about like a minute and don't really give up much potential to that, which is pretty sad. But enough of those, the actual good stuff is what actually helps the animation to be quite gorgeous. Especially with the action scenes throughout the highlight of the film, which is no surprise for a Chinese mythology film like this. Especially through like the character animation, that makes it more fluid and more action packed. Through like the characters' abilities to show off what type of powers they have and what makes them more unique, and even through like the intensity actually reaching pretty high as well, especially when they're used in the backgrounds to show off more of what they can do in those types of locations, and that makes each action scene more unique. In conclusion, The Tiger's Apprentice is quite a waste of potential. Well, it did have a good concept, and I do see the voice actors giving out their all and trying their best, and even the animation itself does look pretty good. it doesn't really surpass the standards of it, which like a weak story where it has a generic plot and pretty forgettable characters, some shite comedy, and a pretty rushed emotional tone that doesn't really add up to the film's quality. And I mean, I don't say this is like bad or anything. I mean, yeah, sure, I can see people saying it is, but I feel like this is more in the type where you're here just to watch the film for the action and not for like the type of story there is. And it's quite similar to The Monkey King 2. So for the best, it's more about action that gives us the attention than the plot, which is something that the film should not do. It should be more about quality over quantity. But it did that, and not the worst, but it's pretty mediocre enough to get itself a 5 out of 10. Next time on Kyle's Reviews is...
A 7 Nation army couldn't hold me back.